The projector screen flickered to life
I
in
told you
Courtroom
never
4B.
to show that footage.
53
This is
people held their
completely
breath.
unacceptable.
What played next was not just evidence of an affair.
Every night, I
it was a
relive what
confession
happened.
to murder.
I
And the
trusted
woman
him
who ran
completely,
screaming from that
and
courtroom,
he betrayed that trust in the
mascara
worst
streaming down
possible
her
way.
face,
Miss Mitchell,
heels
are the
clicking frantically
allegations
against
true?
the marble floor. She was
What do you
not
have to
just
say in
the
your
mistress.
defense?
She was someone the wife
Did
had
you act
trusted with her
alone?
deepest secrets. For 18 years,
Is it
Carolyn
true
Mitchell
you're
was
filing
the
for
invisible
divorce,
wife.
Mr. Mitchell?
The woman everyone
Vanessa,
dismissed.
how could you do this
the
to your
woman
family?
her billionaire husband
your
called
hands off me!
stupid, worthless,
This is a
forgettable.
disgrace.
He thought she was too dumb
Carolyn,
to notice his affair.
you did this. I know
too
you
weak
did
to
this.
fight back. Too broken to ever be a threat. He was catastrophically wrong. Because while he was busy underestimating her, she was watching, learning, gathering evidence, building a case that would destroy not just his marriage, but his entire empire. What happens when the woman everyone ignores finally decides to speak? You are about to find out. This is her story. The projector screen in Courtroom 4B flickered to life, casting pale blue light across the wood-paneled walls of the San Francisco Superior Court. Outside, rain hammered against the tall windows like 1,000 tiny fists demanding entry. Inside, 53 people held their breath. Carolyn Mitchell's hands trembled so violently she could barely grip the small remote control. Her palms were slick with sweat. Her heart pounded against her ribs like a caged animal desperate for freedom. 18 years. 18 years of marriage. 3 miscarriages that had hollowed out her soul. Countless nights crying herself to sleep while her husband claimed to be working late. Thousands of small humiliations. Millions of tears shed in private. And now, finally, the truth. But what played on that screen was not just evidence of an affair. It was not simply proof that her husband had been sleeping with his 26-year-old assistant while Caroline sat alone in their mansion, wondering what she had done wrong. It was a confession to murder. And the woman who would run screaming from that courtroom in exactly 47 minutes, her designer heels clicking frantically against the marble floor, her perfectly applied makeup streaming down her face in rivers of black mascara. She was not just the mistress. She was someone Carolina had trusted with her deepest secrets. Someone who had held her hand and promised everything would be okay. Someone who had betrayed her in ways she was only beginning to understand. You think you know betrayal? You think you have seen the worst that human beings can do to each other? You have not seen anything yet. Let me take you back to where it all began, 8 hours earlier on a morning that would change everything. The storm had rolled in overnight, transforming San Francisco into a watercolor painting of gray skies and rain-slicked streets, the kind of weather that made sensible people stay home with cups of hot coffee and good books, the kind of weather that seemed designed specifically for endings. Carolyn Mitchell stepped out of a yellow taxi in front of the Superior Court building at exactly 8:32 in the morning. She had no driver, no security detail, no entourage of supporters to shield her from the photographers who had gathered like vultures on the courthouse steps. She was alone. She clutched an umbrella that had seen better days. The fabric was faded, one of the metal spokes slightly bent from the time she had used it to prop open a window in the guest house. It had been a gift from her mother, purchased at a department store that had since gone out of business. Like so many things in Caroline's life, it was practical, worn, and completely unremarkable. Her dress was charcoal gray, purchased 5 years ago on sale for $67. She had worn it to her mother's funeral. She had worn it to parent-teacher conferences when Lucas was still in high school. She had worn it to countless charity functions where she stood in the corner while Derek worked the room, invisible and forgettable. Today, she wore it to end her marriage. Carolyn was 44 years old. Her dark hair was pulled back in a severe bun that did nothing to flatter her face. The circles under her eyes told the story of too many sleepless nights, too many hours spent crying in bathrooms while her husband entertained guests in the next room. According to the tabloids, she was the mousy wife who could not keep her billionaire husband satisfied. The plain Jane who had somehow landed one of the most eligible bachelors in California, only to lose him to a younger, prettier, more exciting woman. The human equivalent of beige wallpaper. Forgettable. Invisible. Nothing. The tabloids were about to learn how catastrophically wrong they were. Carolyn paused on the courthouse steps, letting the rain patter against her umbrella. She could see the photographers watching her, their lenses trained on her face, waiting for her to crack, waiting for tears, waiting for the breakdown that would make tomorrow's headlines. She gave them nothing. Instead, she tilted her head back slightly and looked up at the gray sky. Somewhere up there, her mother was watching, her father too. The parents who had raised her to be strong, to be patient, to be observant. The parents who had taught her that the quiet ones often saw the most. I am ready, she thought. I have been ready for 3 years. Let us finish this. Across the street, a black Maybach glided to a stop at the curb. The vehicle cost more than most houses. Its windows were tinted so dark that the occupants were invisible until the rear door swung open. Derek Mitchell emerged like a king greeting his subjects. He was 51 years old, but looked 10 years younger, thanks to an army of personal trainers, nutritionists, and the best plastic surgeon money could buy. His hair was silver at the temples, distinguished rather than old. His jaw was sharp, his shoulders broad, his posture perfect. He wore a navy suit that had been cut on Savile Row during a business trip to London, the kind of suit that cost more than most people earned in a month. Derek Mitchell was the CEO of Titan Logistics, the largest shipping and logistics company on the West Coast. His net worth was estimated at $2.3 billion. He had been featured on the covers of Forbes, Fortune, and Businessweek. He had golfed with senators and dined with presidents. He was, by any measure, one of the most powerful men in California. And he was about to learn that power means nothing when you underestimate the wrong person. Derek adjusted his silver cufflinks, custom-made with his initials, as he surveyed the crowd of reporters. He smiled the smile that had charmed investors, intimidated competitors, and seduced more women than Caroline could count. On his arm was Vanessa Blake, 26 years old, blonde hair that cost $300 to maintain every 6 weeks at the most exclusive salon in the city, skin that glowed with the kind of youth that no amount of money could buy for a woman in her 40s. She wore a white pencil skirt that hugged her curves and a modest silk blouse that had been carefully chosen to make her look innocent. Virginal even, like the victim of forbidden love rather than the architect of a marriage's destruction. Vanessa dabbed at perfectly dry eyes with a lace handkerchief, playing her part to absolute perfection. Every gesture was calculated, every sniffle rehearsed. She was performing for the cameras, and she knew it. Derek leaned close to her, speaking loud enough for the gathered reporters to hear every word. Ignore the cameras, babe. She will be out of our lives by lunch, babe. He had never called Caroline babe, not even in the early years when they were young and in love, and the future stretched before them like an endless golden road. He had called her dear, honey, sweetheart when he was feeling particularly affectionate, but never babe. Carolyn watched them from across the street, her face as still and expressionless as a marble statue. She did not flinch at the casual cruelty. She did not cry at the public humiliation. She did not react at all. Here is the thing about being invisible for 18 years. People forget you can see them too. They forget you can hear. They forget that the quiet woman in the corner, the one they dismiss as boring and unremarkable, has been watching everything, learning everything, cataloging every lie, every betrayal, every moment of casual cruelty. They forget that invisibility is not a weakness. It is a superpower. Derek never understood that his greatest mistake was not the affair. Affairs could be forgiven, or at least tolerated, especially among the wealthy elite who treated marriage as a business arrangement rather than a sacred bond. His greatest mistake was underestimating the woman he had married. Inside the courthouse lobby, the atmosphere crackled with anticipation. Security guards checked bags and waved metal detector wands, while reporters jockeyed for position. This was not just any divorce hearing. This was the dissolution of one of San Francisco's most prominent marriages, and everyone wanted a front row seat to the carnage. The betting pools in the city's legal community ran heavily in Derek's favor. 90-10 odds that he would crush his wife completely, that she would walk away with nothing but the lake house and a pittance of monthly support, that the prenuptial agreement she had signed 18 years ago, young and naive and desperately in love, would strip her of everything. Carolyn passed through the metal detectors alone. No lawyer walked beside her to whisper strategy. No friends had come to offer moral support. Just a woman with a 5-year-old dress and a worn umbrella and a handbag containing a USB drive that felt heavier than lead. Her lawyer was waiting by the courtroom doors. Samuel Porter was 68 years old, with a face like a basset hound and a suit that looked like he had slept in it. His briefcase was ancient leather, scratched and worn, held together by a brass clasp that had been repaired at least 3 times. He was not a celebrity attorney. He did not appear on cable news shows to offer expert opinions. He did not charge $1,500 an hour. He was simply an old friend of Caroline's late father, a man who had known her since she was a child. A man who had bounced her on his knee at family barbecues and sent her birthday cards every year, even after her parents died. Standing next to the polished veneer of Derek's legal team, Samuel looked completely outmatched, like a little league player wandering onto a professional baseball field. That was exactly what Caroline was counting on. Samuel shuffled through his ancient briefcase, his movements slow and deliberate. He pulled out a sandwich wrapped in newspaper, the kind of practical, unglamorous lunch that would make Derek's expensive lawyer sneer. "Want half?" he offered Caroline. "It is tuna. My wife made it this morning." "Sam, court starts in 5 minutes." "Exactly." Samuel took a large bite, chewing thoughtfully. "Cannot fight on an empty stomach. Ellen always says that. 43 years of marriage, and she still makes my lunch every day. That is the secret, you know, finding someone who cares enough to make you a sandwich." Despite everything, despite the terror and the anticipation and the knowledge of what was about to happen, Caroline felt the ghost of a smile touch her lips. Samuel had always been able to do that. Find the small moments of humanity in the midst of chaos. "Are you ready, Sam?" she asked. The old lawyer's rheumy eyes searched hers. His expression shifted from casual to serious in an instant. "Once we start this, there is no going back. You understand that, right?" He kept his voice low, barely above a whisper. "He will throw everything at you, every weapon in his arsenal. He will try to humiliate you in front of the whole courtroom, in front of the press, in front of the world." "I know. And you still want to do this?" Caroline tightened her grip on her handbag. The USB drive inside seemed to pulse with energy, like a bomb waiting to detonate. "I am not here to negotiate anymore, Sam. I am not here to beg for scraps from his table." She met his eyes, and something in her gaze made the old lawyer take a step back. "I am here to finish it." Samuel studied her for a long moment. Then he nodded slowly, a smile spreading across his weathered face. "Your father would be proud of you, Carolyn. He always said you were the strongest of his children. Even when you were just a little thing, no bigger than a minute, he could see it in you." The courtroom doors swung open. A bailiff gestured for them to enter. Inside, Judge Patricia Harrison was already seated at the bench, an imposing woman in her 60s with steel gray hair and reading glasses perched on her nose. She was reviewing a stack of documents with a frown that suggested she had better things to do than referee a billionaire's divorce. The gallery was packed with Derek's supporters, board members from Titan Logistics in expensive suits, executives who owed their careers to the CEO's favor, society friends who had chosen sides and picked the winner. They filled the front rows like an army preparing for battle, their faces smug with anticipated victory. Carolyn took her seat at the plaintiff's table. The wood was polished to a high shine, reflecting the fluorescent lights overhead. She poured herself a glass of water from the crystal pitcher provided, noting with distant amusement that her hand was perfectly steady. Across the aisle, Derek leaned back in his leather chair with the casual confidence of a man who had already won. His new lawyer, Richard Caldwell, was organizing documents with mechanical precision. Caldwell was everything Samuel was not. Tailored suit, perfect posture, a reputation for never losing. Derek caught Caroline's eye and winked, actually winked at her, like this was all a game and he had already counted his chips. Then he turned to look at the front row where Vanessa sat clutching her designer purse like a shield. He blew her a kiss. "All rise," the bailiff announced. "The Superior Court of California is now in session. The Honorable Judge Patricia Harrison presiding." Everyone stood. Carolyn clasped her hands in front of her and stared at the blank projector screen mounted on the side wall. In less than an hour, that screen would display the evidence that would destroy her husband completely. But she could not think about that yet, could not let the anticipation show on her face. Just wait, she thought. Just wait. Judge Harrison settled into her chair and surveyed the courtroom over the rims of her reading glasses. Her expression was neutral, professional, revealing nothing of her personal opinions about the circus that was about to unfold. "This court is now in session," she announced. "We are here for the matter of Mitchell versus Mitchell, case number 7429-25, the dissolution of marriage between Derek Allen Mitchell and Caroline Elizabeth Mitchell." She shuffled her papers. "I have reviewed the preliminary filings. I understand both parties are contesting the division of assets and the enforcement of the prenuptial agreement. Is that correct?" Richard Caldwell rose smoothly to his feet. "Yes, Your Honor. My client, Mr. Mitchell, asked that the prenuptial agreement be enforced as written." Mrs. Mitchell was fully aware of the terms when she signed. Samuel stood more slowly, his knees audibly cracking. "Your Honor, we contend that the prenuptial agreement should be voided due to fraud, coercion, and criminal conduct on the part of Mr. Mitchell." A murmur rippled through the gallery. Criminal conduct was not language typically used in divorce proceedings. Judge Harrison raised an eyebrow. "Those are serious allegations, Mr. Porter. I trust you have evidence to support them?" "We do, Your Honor." "Very well." She made a note. "Mr. Caldwell, you may proceed with your opening statement." Richard Caldwell buttoned his jacket and walked to the center of the courtroom. Every movement was precise, calculated to project confidence and authority. He was a predator preparing to strike, and he wanted everyone to know it. "Your Honor, ladies and gentlemen," he began, his voice a smooth baritone that had convinced countless juries over a 30-year career. "We are here today because my client, Derek Mitchell, has suffered through 18 years of a loveless, emotionally abusive marriage, 18 years of accusations, 18 years of paranoia, 18 years of watching his wife spiral into instability while he built an empire that employs over 40,000 people." He paused for effect, letting the words sink in. "We intend to prove that Mrs. Mitchell is not only financially irresponsible, but has exhibited patterns of unstable behavior that make her unfit to manage any significant assets. We have sworn affidavits from staff members at the Mitchell estate, the housekeeper who witnessed Mrs. Mitchell's erratic outbursts, the driver who was ordered to follow Mr. Mitchell and report his movements, the groundskeeper who found evidence that Mrs. Mitchell was secretly recording private conversations." Carolyn kept her face still, but inside she felt a cold fury building. Every accusation was a lie. Every claim was a distortion of the truth. Derek was projecting his own sins onto her, painting her as the villain in a story where she had always been the victim. Most disturbingly, Caldwell continued, "We will present evidence that Mrs. Mitchell engaged in multiple extramarital affairs during the course of the marriage, affairs that she conducted while my client worked tirelessly to provide for their family, affairs that caused him immeasurable emotional pain." The gallery murmured. Some of the society women in the front rows exchanged knowing looks. "We ask that the prenuptial agreement be enforced strictly," Caldwell concluded. "Mrs. Mitchell should receive only what the document specifies. The lake house and a monthly stipend of $5,000. Nothing more. It is generous, all things considered." He returned to his seat, looking satisfied. Judge Harrison turned to Samuel. "Mr. Porter, your response?" Samuel rose, and Carolyn could see him playing up his age, his rumpled appearance, his apparent frailty, making himself seem even more outmatched than he was. "Your Honor," Samuel said, his voice raspy but clear, "my client spent 18 years supporting Mr. Mitchell, not just emotionally but professionally. She was there when Titan Logistics was nothing but a dream scribbled on a napkin. She helped write the original business plans. She managed the household so he could focus on building his company. She sacrificed her own career aspirations to be the supportive wife that society expected." He shuffled toward the judge's bench. "And how did Mr. Mitchell repay that loyalty? By conducting a 3-year affair with his executive assistant, by secretly transferring $40 million to offshore accounts in preparation for this divorce, by conspiring with his own attorney to hide assets that rightfully belonged to both parties." Caldwell jumped to his feet. "Objection! These allegations are unfounded. Mr. Porter is attempting to prejudice the court with wild accusations." "They are not wild accusations," Samuel replied calmly. "They are documented facts, and we have the evidence to prove it." Judge Harrison held up her hand. "Gentlemen, please. This is a hearing, not a debate. Mr. Porter, you mentioned evidence. I assume you intend to present it." We do, Your Honor, in due time. Very well, she made another note. Mr. Caldwell, you may call your first witness. Caldwell smiled. The prosecution calls Vanessa Blake to the stand. The gallery buzzed as Vanessa rose from her seat in the front row. She smoothed her white pencil skirt, adjusted her silk blouse, and walked to the witness stand with the kind of vulnerable grace that made men want to protect her and women want to hate her. Every step was calculated. Every gesture was rehearsed. She was performing the role of her life, and she knew exactly how to play it. Vanessa placed her hand on the Bible and took the oath. I swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help me God. Her voice trembled just the right amount. Not so much that it seemed fake, just enough to suggest that she was nervous, frightened, a delicate flower forced to testify against her will. Carolyn wanted to vomit. Miss Blake, Caldwell began gently, approaching the witness stand with the careful movements of a man approaching a wounded bird. Thank you for being here today. I know this must be difficult for you. It is, Vanessa whispered, dabbing at her eyes with her lace handkerchief. Very difficult. Let us start with some background. You were employed at Titan Logistics for 3 years, correct? Yes, sir. I started as an executive assistant in the marketing department. After 6 months, I was promoted to be Mr. Mitchell's personal assistant. And in that role, you had regular contact with both Mr. and Mrs. Mitchell? I did. Vanessa's voice was soft, wounded. Mr. Mitchell was wonderful to work for. Professional, respectful, the kind of boss everyone dreams about. And Mrs. Mitchell? Vanessa hesitated, as if reluctant to speak ill of anyone. She was different. Different how? She would call the office constantly, sometimes 5 or 6 times a day, demanding to know where Mr. Mitchell was, who he was meeting with, what time he would be home. Vanessa shook her head sadly. It was not normal. The other assistants talked about it. Everyone knew Mrs. Mitchell was paranoid. Did Mrs. Mitchell ever speak to you directly? Many times, Vanessa's lower lip trembled. She accused me of sleeping with her husband, called me terrible names. Once she showed up at the office unannounced and screamed at me in front of everyone. It was humiliating. I see. And did you observe any concerning behavior between Mr. and Mrs. Mitchell? Vanessa nodded solemnly. Once, about 2 years ago, I saw bruises on Mr. Mitchell's arms. I asked him what happened. He said he fell while playing tennis. She paused, letting the implications sink in. But I knew, she whispered. I knew she had done it. The way he flinched when she called. The way he looked when he came to work some mornings, like he had not slept, like he was afraid. Carolyn's jaw tightened so hard her teeth ached. Every word was a lie, a carefully constructed fabrication designed to paint her as the villain. Derek had never played tennis in his life. The only bruises he had ever received were from the boxing gym he visited 3 times a week. Caldwell nodded sympathetically. Now, Miss Blake, I have to ask you about the nature of your relationship with Mr. Mitchell. Vanessa looked at Derek, her eyes full of manufactured love. We are together now. I will not deny that. But while I worked for him, it was strictly professional. I never would have done anything to compromise his marriage. Then how did your relationship develop? Vanessa took a deep breath, as if steeling herself to reveal a painful truth. Mr. Mitchell was broken. His wife's cruelty had worn him down. He tried so hard to make her happy, but nothing was ever enough. She accused him of affairs he never had. She tracked his movements. She isolated him from his friends. A tear slid down Vanessa's cheek. Perfectly timed, perfectly placed, I only comforted him. As a friend, as someone who could see how much pain he was in. We did not begin our relationship until after he and Mrs. Mitchell separated. I respect the sanctity of marriage, Your Honor. She turned to the judge with wide, innocent eyes. I really do. Caroline felt a bubble of bitter laughter rising in her chest. The sanctity of marriage. This woman had worn Caroline's stolen diamond earrings to the company Christmas party 2 years ago, while Caroline was still married to Derek. While she was at home, recovering from her 3rd miscarriage, bleeding and broken and wondering why her husband had not come to hold her hand. The sanctity of marriage from a woman who had laughed about Caroline's dying mother while sleeping in Caroline's bed on Christmas Eve. The hypocrisy was breathtaking. Thank you, Miss Blake. Caldwell said warmly. No further questions. He returned to his seat, looking supremely satisfied. Judge Harrison turned to the plaintiff's table. Mr. Porter, your witness. Samuel rose slowly. He did not approach the witness stand. He did not try to intimidate or pressure. He simply stood by his chair, studying Vanessa with a mixture of pity and barely concealed disgust. Miss Blake, he said, his voice raspy with age, you stated that your relationship with Mr. Mitchell began after the separation date of August 1st of last year. Is that correct? Yes, Vanessa's chin lifted. Absolutely. And you stated that Mrs. Mitchell was abusive and paranoid, that everyone at the office knew about her behavior. Everyone knew it, Vanessa snapped. The sweet girl act slipped for just a moment, revealing something cold and hard beneath the surface. She was crazy. Ask anyone. Samuel nodded slowly. No further questions. The courtroom murmured in confusion. That was it? Was Samuel giving up already? Even Judge Harrison looked surprised. Mr. Porter, the judge said, do you not wish to cross-examine the witness further? No, Your Honor. I believe Miss Blake has said quite enough. He sat down. Derek leaned over to whisper something to Caldwell. Both men chuckled quietly. They were laughing at Samuel, at Caroline, at the pathetic attempt to fight back against the Mitchell machine. They would not be laughing for long. Mr. Caldwell, Judge Harrison said, do you have additional witnesses? We do, Your Honor, but in the interest of time, we would like to move directly to our motion. Given the evidence of Mrs. Mitchell's instability, we ask that the prenuptial agreement be enforced immediately and that she be denied any claim to marital assets beyond what the document specifies. The judge frowned. Mr. Porter, do you have any witnesses or evidence to present? Samuel picked up a small remote control from the table. His movements were deliberate, unhurried. Actually, Your Honor, we do not have witnesses in the traditional sense. He stood up straight, and suddenly he did not look like a frail old man at all. He looked like a hunter who had been patiently waiting for his prey to walk into a trap. In a case of, she said, we felt it would be better to let the facts speak for themselves. He held up the remote. We have video evidence we would like to enter as Exhibit A. The courtroom went silent. Richard Caldwell was on his feet before Samuel could finish his sentence. Objection! His voice cracked with sudden alarm. We have not been provided with this evidence in discovery. This is an ambush. Judge Harrison held up her hand. Mr. Caldwell, please. She turned to Samuel with a measured expression. Mr. Porter, why was this evidence not disclosed during the discovery process? Samuel smiled, the expression of a man who had been waiting for exactly this question. Your Honor, the evidence was obtained from security cameras installed in the marital residence. As joint property, Mrs. Mitchell had every legal right to install security equipment. The footage was stored on her personal cloud account. We did not believe we were required to disclose the contents of her personal files. This is outrageous, Caldwell sputtered. Personal files that contain recordings of my client are absolutely subject to discovery. I move to have this evidence excluded. Judge Harrison considered for a moment. This is a civil proceeding, not a criminal trial. Different rules apply. She looked at Caroline. Mrs. Mitchell, were these recordings made with your husband's knowledge? Caroline stood. No, Your Honor. I installed the cameras after I discovered my husband was having an affair. I wanted documentation in case he tried to deny it. And he never knew? He thought I was too stupid to understand technology. Caroline's voice was steady. He was wrong. A ripple of reaction passed through the gallery. Derek's face had gone very still. Judge Harrison made her decision. I will allow the evidence. This is a discovery hearing to determine the facts of the matter. If the footage is authentic and relevant, I want to see it. She gavelled once. Proceed, Mr. Porter. Your Honor, Caldwell tried one more time. I must insist you have noted your objection. It is overruled. The judge's voice was sharp. Sit down, Mr. Caldwell. The defense attorney sank into his chair, his face pale. Samuel pointed the remote at the projector mounted on the side wall. The screen flickered to life, casting a rectangle of pale blue light. Please dim the lights, Samuel requested. The bailiff hit the switch. The courtroom plunged into semi-darkness. The only light came from the projector, painting everyone's faces in ghostly shades. What you are about to see, Samuel said, his voice hard as granite, is a compilation of security footage from the Mitchell residence, footage that Mr. Mitchell believed had been deleted. He paused. It was not. The screen flickered. A date stamp appeared in the corner. October 14th, 2 years ago. The scene was the living room of the Mitchell mansion. Expensive furniture, original artwork on the walls, a fireplace that had never been used. The audio was crystal clear, captured by microphones hidden in the smoke detectors. Derek was in the frame, pacing across the Persian carpet. He had a phone pressed to his ear, his free hand gesturing as he spoke. "Listen to me, Richard," the on-screen Derek said. The courtroom went absolutely still. "Richard," he was talking to his own lawyer, "I need you to move on this tonight. The Blue Sky Shell Company in the Caymans. Transfer the $40 million from the joint investment account. Do it now, before Caroline notices anything." He paused, listening to the response. "I know it is technically joint property. That is why we have to move it before the divorce proceedings start. She is too stupid to understand offshore banking. By the time she figures out the money is gone, it will be untouchable." Another pause. "The prenup gives her the lake house and $5,000 a month. That is more than she deserves. 18 years of watching her mope around the house, getting fat, crying about her dead parents. I should get a medal for putting up with her as long as I did." In the courtroom, Richard Caldwell looked like he was about to have a stroke. His face had gone from pale to gray. The video was showing him actively conspiring with his client to commit fraud. That was a disbearable offense that was potentially criminal. But the video was not done. The scene cut to a new timestamp, December 24th, 2 years ago, Christmas Eve. Carolyn remembered that night with perfect, agonizing clarity. She had been at the hospital holding her mother's frail hand through another round of chemotherapy. The doctors had said the cancer was aggressive, that they were running out of options. Caroline had called Derek to say she would be late. He had said he understood. He had said he would wait up for her. He had lied. The video showed the master bedroom of the Mitchell mansion. The bed where Caroline had slept every night for 15 years. The Egyptian cotton sheets she had picked out. The antique headboard she had found at an estate sale. Derek walked into the frame, champagne bottle in hand. He was not alone. Vanessa Blake followed him, wearing a red Santa hat and very little else. She was laughing, her face flushed with wine and excitement. "What about your wife?" Vanessa giggled, running her hands up Derek's chest. "Forget the old hag." Derek popped the champagne cork, spraying foam across the floor. "She is at the hospital with her dying mother. Can you believe she actually expected me to go with her? To sit in that depressing room and watch the old bat whine about her treatment?" He poured 2 glasses. "Hopefully she kicks the bucket soon," Derek continued, handing Vanessa a glass. "Then we can stop pretending to care. Caroline has been milking the sympathy angle for months. Oh, my poor mother is sick. Oh, I am so stressed. Oh, why will you not hold my hand?" He affected a high-pitched whining voice. "It is pathetic. She is pathetic." Vanessa climbed onto the bed where Caroline slept, the bed where she had cried herself to sleep 100 times. "When are you going to leave her?" Vanessa asked, pulling Derek toward her. "Soon, baby, soon. Once I secure the Jenkins merger, I will kick her to the curb. She will get the lake house and enough money to survive. That is more than she deserves." He kissed Vanessa deeply. "But until then," Derek murmured against her lips, "you are my little secret." The courtroom gasped. It was a collective intake of breath that seemed to suck all the oxygen from the room. In the gallery, the real Vanessa Blake let out a strangled sound. Her face had gone blotchy and red. The image of her laughing about a dying woman sleeping in the wife's bed on Christmas Eve was now burned into every retina in the room. This was not the innocent victim she had portrayed on the witness stand. This was a willing participant in cruelty. "Turn it off!" Derek roared, jumping to his feet. His face had turned a violent shade of crimson, the veins in his neck bulging. "This is illegal. This is a violation of my privacy. I will sue everyone in this room." Judge Harrison slammed her gavel. The sound echoed like a gunshot. "Sit down, Mr. Mitchell. Bailiff, if he moves again, restrain him." Derek stood frozen, vibrating with rage, but he did not move. 2 bailiffs had already positioned themselves behind him. Samuel did not turn off the video. There is more, Your Honor. The scene changed again. This footage was darker, more intimate. March 15, 15 months ago, the interior of a car. The image came from a dashboard camera facing inward, capturing both the driver and the passenger. Derek was in the driver's seat, his face twisted with fury. Caroline was in the passenger seat, pressed against the door, her body language screaming fear. "You are worthless," the on-screen Derek screamed. "Absolutely worthless. I gave you everything. A house, cars, jewelry. And what do you give me? Nothing. You cannot even manage to stay pregnant long enough to give me an heir." "Derek, please." Carolyn's voice on the recording was small, broken. "The baby. It was not my fault. Everything is your fault." His hand flew across the frame. The sound of the slap was sickeningly loud over the courtroom speakers, a crack that made several people in the gallery flinch. Caroline, in the video, crumpled against the passenger door. A sob tore from her throat. "You want to know about the offshore accounts?" Derek continued, his voice dropping to something cold and deadly. "You want to know where our money goes? It goes where I say it goes. And if you ever mention it again, if you ever threaten me again, I will destroy you." He grabbed her chin, forcing her to look at him. "You tell anyone about the accounts, and I will make sure everyone knows you are insane. I will have you committed. Who are they going to believe? The billionaire CEO who employs 40,000 people? Or the pathetic housewife who cannot even carry a baby to term?" The video cut to black. The lights in the courtroom buzzed back on. For 3 heartbeats, nobody moved. Nobody breathed. The silence was absolute. Then Caroline spoke. Her voice was steady, strong, cutting through the silence like a blade of cold steel. "I was never the abuser, Derek." She stood up from the plaintiff's table and turned to face him directly. "I was always the victim, and now everyone knows it." The chaos that erupted in courtroom 4B would make headlines across the country. Reporters scrambled for their phones, desperate to be the first to break the story. Board members in the gallery looked for the nearest exits, calculating how quickly they could distance themselves from the sinking ship. Richard Caldwell stood frozen at the defense table, his legendary composure shattered beyond repair. But it was Vanessa Blake's reaction that Caroline would remember for the rest of her life. The mistress rose from her seat in the front row, her movements jerky and uncoordinated. Her carefully applied makeup had begun to run, mascara tracking down her cheeks like black tears. The perfectly innocent victim she had portrayed on the witness stand had vanished, replaced by something raw and desperate. "I did not know," Vanessa stammered, her voice rising to a shriek. "I did not know he would show it. Derek told me no one would ever see. He promised." She turned to look at Derek, but he was not looking at her. He was staring at the blank projector screen as if he could will the images to disappear. "Derek," Vanessa's voice cracked, "say something." He did not respond. For 3 years, Vanessa had believed she was special, that she was different from all the other women, that Derek Mitchell truly loved her and would leave his boring wife to be with her. She had believed the lies because she wanted to believe them. Now, watching him refuse to even acknowledge her existence, she understood the truth. She had been a pawn, a disposable plaything, just like Caroline, just like Victoria Bennett before her, though she did not know that name yet. "You liar," a woman from the back of the gallery yelled. It was Helen Martinez, Caroline's neighbor from 2 houses down. The woman who had watched Caroline grow thin and pale over the years, who had heard the muffled sounds of arguments through the walls. "You lying witch." The accusation broke something in Vanessa. The shame hit her like a physical weight, crushing the air from her lungs. She grabbed her designer purse, let out a high-pitched sob that echoed off the courtroom walls, and ran. She sprinted down the center aisle, her heels clicking frantically against the marble floor. A reporter surged forward, cameras flashing, but she did not stop. She burst through the double doors with a crash and disappeared into the hallway. The mistress ran out crying, just as the story promised. But the drama was far from over. "Order!" Judge Harrison slammed her gavel repeatedly, the sharp crack cutting through the chaos. "Complete silence. I will have order in this court." The room gradually stilled, though the tension remained thick enough to choke on. Judge Harrison removed her reading glasses and pinched the bridge of her nose. When she looked up, Her expression was hard as granite. "Mr. Caldwell," she said, her voice dangerously calm, "I'm going to have a very serious conversation with the state bar about your involvement in concealing assets. The video clearly shows you receiving instructions from your client to commit fraud. That is a disparable offense at minimum." Caldwell's mouth opened and closed like a fish gasping for air. "Your Honor, the video could be fabricated. Deepfake technology is very advanced these days. We need to verify. Save your excuses for the Ethics Committee." Judge Harrison's contempt was barely concealed. "I am also referring this matter to the District Attorney's Office for potential criminal charges regarding fraud and conspiracy." She turned her gaze to Derek, who had finally stopped staring at the projector screen. His face had gone a sickly shade of gray, the confident smirk completely erased. "Mr. Mitchell," the judge continued, "given the evidence of domestic assault presented in that video, I am issuing an immediate temporary restraining order. You are to have no contact with Mrs. Mitchell whatsoever. If you come within 500 feet of her, you will be arrested." "This is insane," Derek snarled, his composure finally cracking. "She recorded me without my permission. That is illegal. She should be the one facing charges." "Mr. Mitchell, you just watched yourself confess to fraud and witnessed yourself committing assault. I suggest you stop talking before you make things worse." "But, Your Honor," Caldwell tried again, a desperate edge to his voice. "California is a two-party consent state. Recording someone without their knowledge is a felony under Penal Code Section 632. We move to have this evidence dismissed and criminal charges filed against Mrs. Mitchell." The courtroom went silent. Carolyn felt her blood run cold. She looked at Samuel. The old lawyer's face had gone gray. Judge Harrison was quiet for a long moment, reviewing a document on her desk. "Mr. Caldwell raises a valid legal point," she finally said. Her voice was careful, measured. "The recordings do appear to have been made without Mr. Mitchell's consent." Caroline's heart began to pound. "However," Judge Harrison continued, "the question of whether these recordings constitute illegal wiretapping will need to be addressed in a separate proceeding. For now, I have seen enough to freeze all assets associated with Mr. Mitchell in the Blue Sky Holdings Company pending a full forensic audit." "Your Honor," Caldwell pressed his advantage. "If the evidence was obtained illegally, it cannot be used in any proceeding. The fruit of the poisonous tree." The judge held up her hand. "I am recessing this hearing for 1 week while I research the admissibility question. In the meantime, the asset freeze stands. Mr. Mitchell is not to leave the state. His passport will be surrendered to the court." She gathered her papers. "Court is in recess." The gavel struck. As the courtroom began to empty, Derek turned to look at Caroline. His eyes burned with hatred, but beneath that, she could see something else. Fear. "Nice try," he said, his voice a low hiss. "But you just made a big mistake. My lawyers are going to tear that evidence apart. And when they prove you broke the law, you are going to prison." He straightened his tie, already rebuilding his armor. "And I will make sure you never see Lucas again." He walked out, followed by his shell-shocked legal team. Caroline remained seated, her hands trembling despite her best efforts to stay calm. She had shown the world the truth. Everyone had seen what Derek really was. But in the twisted logic of the legal system, telling the truth might send her to prison while the liar went free. "Sam," she said quietly, "what just happened?" Samuel sank into the chair beside her. His face was ashen, suddenly looking every one of his 68 years. "I made a mistake," he admitted. "I should have researched the consent laws more carefully. California requires both parties to consent to recording. It does not matter that the cameras were in your own home. If Derek did not know about them, the recordings might be inadmissible." He rubbed his eyes with a weathered hand. "If the judge rules against us, the videos get thrown out. All of them. Derek walks away clean, and you face felony charges." Caroline stared at the blank projector screen. The truth had finally been shown. Millions of people would see the news coverage. Everyone would know what kind of man Derek Mitchell really was. But none of that would matter if she went to prison for exposing him. "What do we do now?" Samuel placed a hand on her arm. His grip was surprisingly strong. "We do not give up. There has to be another way. The offshore accounts, the fraud, the assault. Even without the videos, there might be other evidence. We just have to find it. He stood up slowly. Go home, Caroline. Get some rest. I'm going to dig deeper into Blue Sky Holdings. There is something there. The payments to someone with the initials VB. I want to know who that is. Carolyn nodded numbly. Outside the courthouse, the rain had stopped. A weak sun was trying to break through the clouds, casting watery light across the wet streets. Carolyn stood on the steps, watching Derek's Maybach pull away. She had waited 3 years for this day. 3 years of planning, 3 years of pretending to be the weak, stupid wife while secretly gathering evidence. And in 5 minutes, Richard Caldwell had found the loophole that might destroy everything. Carolyn pulled out her phone and scrolled through her contacts until she found a number she had not called in years. A number given to her by a private investigator she had hired when she first suspected Derek's affair. A number connected to someone who claimed to have information about Derek's past. She pressed call. It rang 3 times before a woman answered. Hello, is this Margaret Bennett? There was a long pause. Who is this? My name is Caroline Mitchell. I am married to Derek Mitchell. Or I was. I am in the middle of divorcing him. Another pause, longer this time. When the woman spoke again, her voice was different, harder, more cautious. I have been waiting 5 years for someone to call me about Derek Mitchell. But I need to know. Are you sure you want to hear what I have to say? Yes, then we should meet in person. What I know cannot be shared over the phone. Carolyn looked up at the gray sky. Tell me when and where. The week that followed the courtroom revelation was the worst of Caroline's life. Derek's public relations team went into overdrive within hours of the hearing's conclusion. By the next morning, every news outlet in the country was running a different version of the story. Not the story of a brave woman exposing her abusive husband. No, the story they told was about a vindictive wife who had illegally wiretapped her home. A scorned woman who could not accept that her marriage was over. A criminal who deserved prosecution. The hashtag Team Derek began trending on social media. Thousands of strangers, people who had never met either of them, took sides. They called Caroline crazy, obsessed, dangerous. They said she had driven her poor husband into the arms of another woman with her paranoia and instability. The few voices defending her were drowned out by the noise. Then came the eviction notice. Carolyn stood in the foyer of the mansion she had called home for 15 years, reading the legal document in her trembling hands. Derek's lawyers had moved faster than she thought possible. Since the prenuptial agreement gave her no claim to the primary residence, and since she was under investigation for potential felony charges, the court had granted Derek exclusive occupancy. She had 24 hours to leave, 24 hours to pack 18 years of memories into boxes, 24 hours to say goodbye to the garden she had planted, the room she had decorated, the life she had built. She filled 3 suitcases with clothes. She took the photo albums her mother had given her, the ones with pictures of Caroline as a baby, as a toddler, as a gap-toothed child on her first day of school. She took the jewelry that had belonged to her grandmother, simple pieces with more sentimental value than monetary worth. Everything else she left behind. The mansion had never really been her home anyway. It had been a prison, a gilded cage where she had slowly disappeared, one small humiliation at a time. Her son called that evening. Lucas was 19 years old, a sophomore at Stanford University. He had his father's dark hair and his mother's eyes. Caroline had spent 18 years protecting him, loving him, trying to shield him from the worst of his parents' marriage. She had hoped desperately that he would see through his father's lies. Mom. Lucas's voice was strained, distant. I saw the news. Lucas, please. Let me explain. Dad's lawyer called me. He said you have been recording our house for years. He said you might go to jail. That is not the whole story. You saw the videos. You saw what your father did. There was a long pause on the line. He said the videos were edited, that you manipulated them to make him look bad. Lucas, that is not true. You know me. You know I would never, do I? His voice cracked. Do I really know you, Mom? Because the person I thought I knew would never secretly record our home, would never do something illegal to win a divorce. Carolyn closed her eyes. The pain in her chest was physical, like someone had reached inside her and squeezed her heart. Dad says I should not talk to you anymore, Lucas continued. He says you are unstable, that you might try to manipulate me. I am your mother and he is my father. And right now I do not know which one of you is telling the truth. So I think I need some space. Lucas, please, I have to go, Mom. The line went dead. Carolyn sank to the floor of her rented studio apartment. 400 square feet of water-stained walls and creaking floorboards. The only place she could afford on short notice, in a building where the elevator was broken and the heating worked only intermittently. She collapsed onto the air mattress that served as her bed and let herself break. The sobs tore through her chest, ugly and raw and uncontrolled. 18 years of being strong. 18 years of holding everything together. 18 years of swallowing her pain and plastering on a smile and pretending everything was fine. She let it all go. She cried for her marriage, for the love she had once felt for Derek, back when they were young and full of dreams, for the slow death of that love, murdered by 1,000 small cruelties over 2 decades. She cried for her children, for the babies she had lost, the 3 pregnancies that had ended in blood and grief, for Lucas, who had been turned against her by a father's lies. She cried for her parents, both dead now, who would never see justice done. She cried until there were no tears left, until her throat was raw and her eyes were swollen and her body felt hollow. And then, in the silence of that tiny apartment, she heard a knock on the door. Carolyn wiped her face with the back of her hand and stumbled to the door. Through the peephole, she saw a woman in her early 70s standing in the hallway, white hair cut short, sharp eyes that missed nothing, a cigarette dangling from her lips despite the no smoking signs posted everywhere. You dying in there or just being dramatic? The woman called through the door. Carolyn opened it. Excuse me? The woman walked past her without waiting for an invitation, surveying the apartment with unconcealed judgment. I am Gladys. I live next door. Walls are thin. Been listening to you cry for 3 days. She held up a casserole dish covered in aluminum foil. Made you this. It is terrible, but it is hot. Sit down. Eat. I do not. Was not asking. Gladys set the dish on the tiny kitchen counter and began rummaging through the cabinets. You got any plates, or are you living like a complete animal? I just moved in. Clearly, Gladys found a paper plate, served up a generous portion of casserole, and thrust it at Carolyn. Eat. Carolyn found herself obeying. She was too exhausted to argue. The casserole was indeed terrible. Overcooked noodles swimming in sauce from a jar, topped with cheese that had been burned on one side and undercooked on the other. But it was the first warm meal Carolyn had eaten in days, and she devoured it like a starving woman. Gladys watched her with approval. There we go. Cannot fight on an empty stomach. Now, she lit a fresh cigarette, ignoring Caroline's cough. Tell me what is going on. I saw you on the news. They are saying you are some kind of criminal mastermind. I am not a criminal. Did not say you were. I said that is what they are saying. Big difference. Carolyn set down her fork. My husband cheated on me for 3 years. I caught him on video. Now I am the one facing charges because I recorded him without his permission. Gladys snorted, a sound of pure contempt. Sounds about right. Rich men have different rules. Always have, always will. She settled into the apartment's only chair, a plastic lawn chair that Caroline had bought at a drugstore. Listen, honey, I have buried 3 husbands. 2 of them deserved it. You buried 3 husbands? The first one, Harold, died of a heart attack. Nice man. Boring, but nice. Left me a little money. She took a long drag on her cigarette. The second one, Frank, was a cheater. Used to sneak out to see his secretary every Thursday afternoon. Told me he was bowling. What happened to him? Fell off a ladder cleaning the gutters. Very tragic. There was something in Gladys's tone that made Caroline look at her more closely. And the third? Walter was a gambler. Lost everything we had at the horse races. Then he had the nerve to take out a life insurance policy on me. Can you imagine? She chuckled darkly. He did not realize I knew about the policy, or that I had switched his heart medication with sugar pills. Carolyn's eyes went wide. Relax. Gladys waved her cigarette dismissively. I am just joking. Walter choked on a piece of steak. These things happen. She did not look like she was joking. Point is, Gladys continued, I know what it is like to be married to a man who thinks he can do whatever he wants. And I know what it is like to fight back. She leaned forward, her eyes sharp. You know what I learned after 50 years of dealing with men like your husband? When they think they have won, that is when they get sloppy. Let him celebrate. Let him think you are beaten. Let him relax his guard. And then you gut him like a fish. Carolyn stared at the old woman, this strange, chain-smoking neighbor who had appeared out of nowhere with terrible casserole and even more questionable life advice. I do not even know where to begin. You begin by not giving up. Gladys stubbed out her cigarette. You begin by looking for the thing he does not want you to find. Rich men always have secrets. Bigger the fortune, bigger the secrets. She stood up and headed for the door. This offshore account thing you mentioned. The payments to someone with initials VB. That is where you dig. How do you know about that? Honey, I told you. Walls are thin, and I have excellent hearing for my age. Despite everything, Carolyn laughed. It was a small sound, rusty from disuse but real. Thank you, Gladys. Do not thank me yet. I have a feeling this is going to get worse before it gets better. But when it does get better, you owe me a real dinner. Somewhere nice. With tablecloths and wine glasses that are not made of plastic. Deal. Good. Gladys opened the door. Now get some sleep. Tomorrow you start fighting back. Samuel Porter's heart attack came at 9:17 in the morning on a Tuesday. Carolyn received the call while she was sitting in her tiny apartment, surrounded by bank statements and corporate filings and documents she had printed at the public library. She had been searching for any trace of the Blue Sky Holdings account, any evidence that did not rely on the videos that might be ruled inadmissible. Her phone rang. Unknown number. Mrs. Mitchell? The voice was male, professional, carefully neutral. This is Detective Morrison with the San Francisco Police Department. I am calling about Samuel Porter. Caroline's blood turned to ice. What happened? Mr. Porter was found at his desk this morning by his receptionist. It appears he suffered a massive cardiac arrest. I am sorry to inform you that he passed away. The phone slipped from Caroline's fingers. Samuel. Samuel, who had known her since she was a child. Samuel, who had made her laugh with his tuna sandwiches and his jokes about fighting on an empty stomach. Samuel, who was the only lawyer willing to take her case when everyone else had refused. Dead. She drove to his office in a daze, barely aware of the traffic or the red lights or the pedestrians who honked at her for almost running them over. The building was surrounded by police cars, yellow tape stretching across the entrance. I need to see him, Carolyn said, approaching one of the officers. He was my lawyer. He was my friend. Crime scene, ma'am. No one goes in. Crime scene. She felt the ground tilt beneath her. It was a heart attack. Was not it a heart attack? The officer's expression did not change. I am not at liberty to discuss the details, but I would suggest you stay available for questioning. Caroline stood in the parking lot for a long time after the officer walked away. Her mind was spinning, trying to make sense of what she was hearing. Samuel had been investigating Blue Sky Holdings. Samuel had been asking questions about the VB payments. Samuel had said he was close to finding something. And now Samuel was dead. The official cause was cardiac arrest. A 70-year-old man with a demanding job and too much stress. These things happen, people would say. He pushed himself too hard. But Caroline did not believe in coincidences anymore. She believed that her husband was capable of anything. The funeral was 3 days later, a small service at a church in the old part of the city, the kind of church where the stained glass windows told stories of saints and martyrs and people who had died for their beliefs. Samuel's wife, Ellen, was gracious even in her grief. A small woman with white hair and kind eyes, she had been married to Samuel for 43 years. She had made his tuna sandwiches every morning. She had waited up for him every night, no matter how late his cases ran. She hugged Caroline tightly. He believed in you, Ellen whispered. He told me the night before he died that you reminded him of your father, that you had the same stubborn streak, the same fire. I am so sorry, Ellen, if I had not asked him to take my case. Do not say that. Ellen pulled back to look at Caroline, her eyes fierce despite the tears. Sam died doing what he loved, fighting for someone who needed him. There is no better way for a lawyer to go. She pressed something into Caroline's hand. A flash drive. He asked me to give you this, if anything happened. He said you would know what to do with it. Caroline looked at the small device. What is on it? I do not know, but he said it was important. He said it might be the key to everything. That night, alone in her apartment, Caroline plugged the flash drive into her laptop. There was only one file. A document titled VB. She opened it. It was Samuel's research. Pages and pages of notes, transaction records, corporate filings. And at the center of it all, a name. Victoria Bennett. VB, not Vanessa Blake. Victoria Bennett. A woman who had died in a car accident 5 years ago. A woman who had been married to Derek Mitchell before Caroline even knew he existed. A woman whose death, according to Samuel's notes, was far from accidental. Caroline read through the night, her horror growing with every page. By the time dawn broke over San Francisco, she understood the truth. Derek Mitchell was not just a cheater. He was a murderer. And Samuel Porter had died because he had gotten too close to proving it. The next morning, Caroline met with Margaret Bennett for the first time. Victoria's mother was in her late 50s, with silver hair and elegant bearing that spoke of a life that had once been comfortable. But her clothes were worn, her jewelry simple. Whatever wealth the family had once possessed had clearly been depleted. They met at a coffee shop in a quiet neighborhood, far from anywhere Derek's people might be watching. "Thank you for seeing me," Caroline said. Margaret studied her across the table. Her eyes were haunted, carrying 5 years of grief and unanswered questions. "When you called, I almost did not believe it. All this time, I thought I was the only one who knew the truth, the only one who suspected. Tell me about Victoria." Margaret took a deep breath. "Victoria was my only child. She met Derek when they were both young, before the money, before Titan Logistics. They married right out of college. She helped him build the company from nothing. What happened? The same thing that happened to you." Margaret's voice was bitter. He used her, took everything she had to give, and when she threatened to expose his financial crimes, he killed her. "How?" "Car accident." Margaret's hands trembled around her coffee cup. "She was driving on a mountain road coming back from visiting me. Her brakes failed. The car went over the cliff. That could be a real accident. It could. But Victoria called me the night before she died. She said she had evidence that Derek was laundering money through his shipping routes. She said she was going to take it to the FBI the next morning." Margaret looked up, her eyes burning. The next day, her brakes failed, and the mechanic who had serviced her car the week before, he disappeared, moved to Mexico, they said, with a large deposit in his bank account that no one could explain. Caroline felt sick. "Do you have proof?" "I did. Victoria had sent me copies of everything she had gathered. But 3 days after her funeral, my house was broken into. The files were stolen. My computer was destroyed. So there is no evidence left." Margaret smiled, a cold smile that did not reach her eyes. "That is what Derek believes. But Victoria was smarter than he ever gave her credit for. She knew he might come after me, so she hid a second copy of everything. Where? With the one person Derek would never think to look. Someone he considered so far beneath him that she was invisible." Caroline felt the pieces clicking into place in her mind. Vanessa. Margaret nodded. Victoria met Vanessa before she died, warned her about what kind of man Derek really was, gave her a flash drive with everything. Then why has Vanessa not come forward? Because she did not believe Victoria. She thought it was just a jealous ex-wife trying to cause trouble. She threw the flash drive in a drawer and forgot about it. And now Vanessa has seen the truth. She ran out of that courtroom because she realized she had been played. She is scared, Caroline. Scared of what Derek might do to her. She leaned across the table and took Caroline's hands. "If you can get to her, if you can make her understand that she is the next Victoria waiting to happen, maybe she will finally do the right thing." Caroline thought of Vanessa Blake, the woman who had stolen her husband, who had laughed about her dying mother, who had destroyed her marriage and testified against her in court, the last person in the world she wanted to ask for help. But sometimes survival means making alliances with your enemies. How do I reach her? Finding Vanessa Blake took 3 days. She was no longer at the Marina penthouse. Derek had cut her off completely after her embarrassing exit from the courtroom. The corporate housing agreement had been terminated. Her credit cards had been canceled. The allowance that had kept her in designer clothes and expensive wine had vanished overnight. Vanessa had become, in the span of a single afternoon, exactly what Derek had always seen her as: disposable. Carolyn tracked her down through a combination of persistence and luck. Gladys, it turned out, had a nephew who worked as a building manager in the Tenderloin district. He mentioned that a young blonde woman matching Vanessa's description had rented a room in one of his buildings, paying cash, using a fake name. Carolyn found her in a dingy apartment on the fourth floor of a building that smelled like mildew and broken dreams. The door was answered by a woman who barely resembled the polished mistress from the courtroom. Vanessa's hair was unwashed, pulled back in a messy ponytail. Her makeup was gone, revealing dark circles under her eyes that rivaled Caroline's own. She wore sweatpants and a stained t-shirt, and she flinched when she saw who was standing in her doorway. "Please," Vanessa stepped back, her voice high with panic. "I do not have anything left. He took everything. I am not a threat to anyone. I am not here to hurt you," Carolyn said. "Then why are you here? To gloat? To watch me suffer?" Caroline studied the woman before her. 26 years old, homeless, terrified. Yes, Vanessa had made terrible choices. She had participated in destroying a marriage. She had lied on the witness stand, and she had mocked a dying woman while sleeping in that woman's daughter's bed. But she had also been manipulated by a man who had perfected the art of using people, a man who had discarded her the moment she became inconvenient, just like he had discarded Victoria, just like he would discard anyone who got in his way. "I am here because we have a common enemy," Carolyn said, "and because you have something I need." "I do not have anything." Vanessa's voice cracked. "He cleaned out my accounts, took back the jewelry, even the clothes. I have nothing but what I was wearing when I left that courthouse." "You have a flash drive." Vanessa went very still. "A flash drive given to you by a woman named Victoria Bennett. How do you know about that?" Victoria was Derek's first wife. She died in a car accident that was not really an accident. Caroline stepped closer. Just like Samuel Porter's heart attack was not really a heart attack. Vanessa's face went pale. "Who is Samuel Porter?" "My lawyer. He was investigating Derek's offshore accounts. He was getting close to the truth, and then he died." She let the implications sink in. "Derek kills people, Vanessa. People who threaten him. People who know too much." Vanessa backed away until she hit the wall. "No, no, that is not. He would not." "Would he not? You saw what he was like. You know what he is capable of. The rage, the cruelty, the absolute certainty that he can do whatever he wants without consequences. That is different. Violence, yes. But murder?" Victoria was 26 when she died. Vanessa flinched. "The same age you are now." Carolyn pressed forward. "She looked exactly like you. Same blonde hair, same bone structure. She lived in the same penthouse you lived in. She wore the same clothes. She thought she was special, just like you thought you were special." "Stop." She found evidence of his crimes and threatened to expose him. Her brakes failed the next day. The mechanic who worked on her car disappeared to Mexico with a large deposit in his bank account. "Stop. You know too much, Vanessa. You were in that bedroom on Christmas Eve. You heard him talk about his plans. You know about the offshore accounts." Vanessa was crying now, tears streaming down her face. "He is getting bored, is he not?" Carolyn said softly. "Working late more often. Checking his phone when he thinks you are not looking. Distancing himself." Vanessa nodded. A tiny movement. "He has a type, and when the type gets too old, or too curious, or too inconvenient." Carolyn left the sentence unfinished. Vanessa slid down the wall until she was sitting on the floor, her knees pulled to her chest. She looked like a child, a terrified, broken child who had finally realized she was in a monster's story. "What do you want from me?" she whispered. "The flash drive Victoria gave you. I need it. I still have it. I threw it in my jewelry box and forgot about it. When Derek cleaned out the penthouse, he did not take the jewelry box, just the jewelry. Where is it now?" "Storage unit. I kept some things there. Things I did not want him to know about." She looked up at Caroline, her eyes red and swollen. "If I give you that drive, if I help you, he will kill me. If you do not help me, he will kill you anyway. The only difference is the timing. Caroline extended her hand. You can keep running, keep hiding. Wait for Derek to decide you are a loose end that needs to be tied up. Or you can help me stop him. Help me make sure he never hurts anyone again. Vanessa stared at the offered hand for a long moment. The hand of the woman whose husband she had stolen, whose marriage she had destroyed, whose life she had helped ruin. And then, slowly, she took it. The flash drive from Victoria's files changed everything. Carolyn and Vanessa spent 3 days reviewing the contents. What they found was a roadmap of corruption that stretched back over a decade. Derek Mitchell had been laundering money through Titan Logistics almost from the beginning. Shell companies in the Cayman Islands. Phantom shipping routes that existed only on paper. Payments to government officials who looked the other way. And at the center of it all, the evidence that Victoria had been gathering before her death. Emails between Derek and the mechanic who had serviced her car. Wire transfers to offshore accounts in the days after her death. A draft of a new life insurance policy that Derek had been preparing, with himself as the beneficiary. He was gonna kill me, Vanessa said quietly, staring at the documents spread across Caroline's kitchen table. Just like he killed her. There was more. A memo from Derek to his security chief, discussing ways to handle the Samuel Porter situation. The old man is asking too many questions, it read. We need to make sure he stops. The timestamp was 3 days before Samuel's heart attack. He killed Sam, Carolyn said. She felt the rage building in her chest, a cold fury that threatened to consume her. He killed my lawyer. He killed his first wife. And he was planning to kill you. Vanessa nodded numbly. What do we do? We take this to the FBI. We end this. But Caldwell said the evidence might be inadmissible. The recordings, the documents. Derek's lawyers will argue that everything was obtained illegally. Carolyn shook her head. The recordings from my house might be inadmissible. But Victoria's files are different. She gathered this evidence independently. She gave it to you voluntarily. And you are giving it to me voluntarily. She held up the flash drive. This is not fruit of the poisonous tree. This is a separate source of evidence. Clean evidence. Evidence that Derek does not even know exists. For the first time in weeks, Caroline felt hope. But they needed more. They needed someone who could testify to Derek's crimes. Someone with first-hand knowledge. Someone who could not be dismissed as a scorned ex-wife or a bitter mistress. They needed someone on the inside. I might know someone, Vanessa said slowly. Derek's assistant. Not me, the one who replaced me. Her name is Jennifer Walsh. She handles his private calendar. His personal emails. She knows everything. Is she loyal to him? Vanessa shook her head. She is terrified of him. She told me once that she had seen things that scared her, but she was too afraid to come forward. Can you reach her? Maybe, if she believes we can actually protect her. Then make her believe. It took a week to convince Jennifer Walsh to meet with them. She was a mousy woman in her 30s, plain and forgettable, exactly the kind of person Derek liked to have around. People who faded into the background. People who heard everything because no one thought they were important enough to hide things from. They met at a diner far outside the city where no one would recognize them. I could lose my job, Jennifer said, clutching her coffee cup like a lifeline. I could go to prison. Accessory after the fact. Conspiracy. Obstruction. You could also die, Caroline said bluntly. Derek killed his first wife. He killed my lawyer. He is planning to kill Vanessa. How long before he decides you know too much? Jennifer's hands trembled. I have seen the emails, she whispered, about the offshore accounts, about Victoria, about Samuel Porter. I know what he has done. Then help us stop him. Jennifer looked around the diner as if expecting Derek's security team to burst through the doors at any moment. What do you need? Access to his private files, the ones he keeps on the secure server, the ones even Richard Caldwell does not know about. I can get you access, but if he finds out, he will not find out. Caroline's voice was firm. We are going to end this. And when it is over, Derek Mitchell is going to prison for the rest of his life. Jennifer took a deep breath. Then she nodded. Over the next 2 weeks, they built their case. Jennifer provided access to Derek's secure server. Vanessa helped interpret the financial documents. Caroline coordinated with federal prosecutors, presenting the evidence piece by piece. They discovered that Derek was planning to flee the country, plane tickets to a non-extradition country, wire transfers moving the last of his accessible assets offshore. He was going to abandon Titan Logistics, abandon Vanessa, abandon everything, and disappear before the walls closed in. He knows, Caroline said. He knows we are coming for him. Then we need to move faster. The final piece of the puzzle came from an unexpected source. Margaret Bennett arrived at Caroline's apartment one evening with a manila envelope clutched in her hands. The DNA test, she said. I had it done when William was born. Just in case. William? Margaret's eyes filled with tears. Victoria's son. My grandson. Derek does not know he exists. Victoria told him the baby died. She wanted to protect him. She opened the envelope and showed Caroline the documents inside. A birth certificate, a DNA test confirming paternity, and a photograph of a little boy with his father's eyes. He has a son, Caroline breathed. A son Derek does not know about. A son who is entitled to a share of his father's estate. A son who changes everything. Caroline looked at Margaret with new understanding. You have been waiting 5 years for this moment. I have been waiting 5 years for justice. Margaret's voice was steady, despite the tears on her cheeks. For my daughter, for my grandson, for all the women Derek Mitchell has used and discarded and destroyed. She placed her hand over Caroline's. Make him pay. The final hearing was scheduled for a Wednesday morning in late October. Courtroom 4B was packed to capacity. Every seat in the gallery was filled. Reporters lined the hallway outside, their cameras ready to capture whatever drama unfolded. The Mitchell divorce had become a national story, and everyone wanted to see how it ended. Carolyn arrived at the courthouse alone. She wore a cream-colored suit that fit her perfectly, purchased with the last of her savings. Her hair was down, framing a face that showed no trace of the broken woman who had cried on her kitchen floor 6 weeks earlier. She walked with the quiet confidence of someone who had already won. But she was alone. No lawyer walked beside her. Samuel was dead, and she had decided she did not need anyone else. Derek was already seated at the defense table when she entered. He had a new lawyer, a woman named Patricia Chambers, who had taken over after Richard Caldwell's disbarment. Derek looked confident, composed, every inch the billionaire CEO. But Carolyn saw the cracks beneath the surface, the way his fingers drummed against the table, the slight tension in his jaw, the way his eyes darted to the back of the courtroom, checking the exits. He was afraid. He just did not know yet how afraid he should be. Judge Patricia Harrison entered. All rose. The hearing began with the expected motions. Patricia Chambers argued that the video evidence should be excluded, that Caroline's recordings violated wiretapping laws, that her client was the victim of an illegal surveillance operation. Judge Harrison listened with a neutral expression. Mrs. Mitchell, the judge said, turning to Caroline, I understand you are representing yourself today. Is that correct? Yes, Your Honor. And you understand the complexities of the legal issues involved? I do. Carolyn stood tall. I also understand that sometimes the truth is simpler than lawyers make it seem. A murmur rippled through the gallery. Ms. Chambers has raised valid questions about the admissibility of my recordings, Caroline continued. I accept her argument. I will not be presenting those videos as evidence today. Derek visibly relaxed. A small smile touched his lips. However, Caroline said, I have other evidence to present. Evidence from a completely independent source. The smile froze on Derek's face. What evidence? Chambers demanded. Your Honor, I would like to call Vanessa Blake to the stand. The courtroom doors opened. Vanessa walked in, looking nothing like the crying mess who had fled this room 6 weeks ago. She was calm, composed, dressed simply. Behind her came Margaret Bennett, and behind Margaret came 2 men in FBI windbreakers. Derek's face went white. What is this? He demanded, half rising from his chair. What is happening? Mr. Mitchell, sit down. Judge Harrison's voice was sharp. Ms. Blake, please take the stand. Vanessa was sworn in. Her hands were steady as she placed them on the Bible. Miss Blake, Caroline began, the last time you testified in this court, did you tell the truth? No. Vanessa's voice was clear. I lied. Mr. Mitchell told me what to say. He coached me for weeks. He promised me we would be together once his wife was out of the picture. She looked at Derek. He lied to me, just like he lies to everyone. Carolyn produced a flash drive. Your Honor, I am entering Exhibit B into evidence. This flash drive was given to Miss Blake by Victoria Bennett, Mr. Mitchell's first wife, approximately 5 years ago. It contains financial documents, email correspondence, and evidence of multiple felonies including fraud, money laundering, and conspiracy to commit murder. Conspiracy to murder? Patricia Chambers was on her feet. This is absurd. My client has never been charged with any violent crime. The FBI agents stepped forward. Actually, one of them said, he is about to be. We have reviewed the contents of that flash drive. Combined with additional evidence provided by Jennifer Walsh, Mr. Mitchell's personal assistant, we have sufficient grounds for arrest. Derek lunged to his feet. This is a setup, he screamed. She is manipulating all of you. She is the one who should be in prison. Mr. Mitchell, sit down. Derek did not sit down. He turned and ran. He made it 3 steps before 2 bailiffs tackled him to the ground. The courtroom erupted into chaos. Reporters surged forward. Cameras flashed. Someone was screaming. Through it all, Caroline stood perfectly still. Derek Mitchell, she heard one of the FBI agents say as he handcuffed her thrashing husband. You are under arrest for wire fraud, money laundering, conspiracy to commit murder in the death of Victoria Bennett, and conspiracy to commit murder in the death of Samuel Porter. You have the right to remain. An attorney will be provided for you. Derek was hauled to his feet, his face contorted with rage. You think you have won? He screamed at Caroline. This is not over. I have friends. I have connections. You will never be safe. Caroline walked toward him slowly. The crowd parted before her. She stopped inches from his face. You spent 18 years making me invisible, she said quietly, making me feel worthless, making me believe I was nothing. She leaned closer. You were wrong. She turned and walked away. But there was one more revelation to come. Margaret Bennett stood up in the gallery. Your Honor, she called out, I have one additional piece of evidence to present. With the court's permission, Judge Harrison, who had been trying to restore order, looked at her with exasperation. Who are you? My name is Margaret Bennett. Victoria Bennett was my daughter. The courtroom fell silent. 5 years ago, Margaret continued, her voice ringing through the room, my daughter gave birth to a child. She told Derek the baby died, but the baby did not die. I raised him myself. She held up a photograph. His name is William. He is 4 years old, and a DNA test confirms that Derek Mitchell is his father. Derek, still handcuffed between 2 bailiffs, went absolutely still. That is impossible, he whispered. She told me the baby died. She lied to protect him from you. Margaret's voice was cold. She knew what you were. She knew what you would do to anyone who stood in your way. The judge looked from Margaret to Derek to Caroline. I believe, Judge Harrison said slowly, that we have a great deal more to discuss. Court is in recess. Mr. Mitchell, you will be remanded to federal custody pending arraignment. The gavel struck, and just like that, it was over. 6 months later, San Francisco looked different. Or maybe it was Caroline who had changed. She sat behind the CEO desk at Titan Logistics headquarters, watching the sun set over the bay. The office had been Derek's once. The leather chair, the mahogany desk, the original artwork on the walls, all the trappings of power that he had wielded like weapons. Now they were hers. The board had offered her the position 3 days after Derek's arrest. Interim CEO, they called it at first. Someone needed to steady the ship while the legal chaos sorted itself out. Carolyn had accepted, partly because she needed the salary, partly because she knew the company better than anyone. She had helped build it, after all, 20 years ago in a garage, with nothing but a dream and a napkin covered in scribbled ideas. The interim title had become permanent 2 months later. Under her leadership, the stock price had stabilized. The toxic executives had been removed. The shipping routes had been restructured to eliminate the money laundering channels Derek had created. And every week, a portion of the profits went to a new foundation she had established. The Victoria Bennett Foundation, dedicated to helping survivors of domestic abuse rebuild their lives. Margaret sat on the board. So did Vanessa, believe it or not. Some wounds could be healed with time and genuine remorse. Some could not, but they were trying. Carolyn's phone buzzed, a text from Lucas. On my way, see you in 20 minutes. She smiled. Her son had come around, eventually. It had taken weeks of difficult conversations, tears, accusations, slowly building trust back from the rubble of their broken family. Lucas had visited his father in prison once. Just once. He had come back pale and shaken, and he had never gone again. He is not the man I thought he was, Lucas had said. I do not know if he ever was. Caroline had held him while he cried, not telling him I told you so, not gloating, just being there, the way a mother should be. Some things were more important than being right. A knock on the office door pulled her from her thoughts. Am I interrupting? Gladys poked her head in. She was wearing a dress for once instead of her usual housecoat and cigarette combination. Still looked like she was ready to fight someone. Never. Caroline gestured to the chair across from her desk. What brings you to the corporate headquarters of capitalism? Wanted to see the fancy office. Gladys settled into the chair with a grunt. Nice view, leather chairs. Is that a wet bar? Help yourself. Gladys poured herself a generous glass of whiskey. I saw the news, she said. Derek got sentenced today. 45 years. Caroline's voice was neutral. No possibility of parole. Good. Gladys took a long sip. Too bad they do not have the death penalty for being a complete piece of garbage. The trial had been brutal. 3 months of testimony. Dozens of witnesses, evidence piled upon evidence until even Derek's expensive legal team could not find a way to spin it. The jury had deliberated for 4 hours before returning guilty verdicts on all counts. Derek had wept during sentencing. Actually wept, tears streaming down his face, begging the judge for mercy, saying he was sorry, saying he had changed. The judge had not been impressed. You are not sorry for what you did, she had said. You are sorry you got caught. There is a difference. Caroline had watched from the gallery. She had not felt triumph, had not felt satisfaction. She had just felt tired and ready to move on. How is the kid? Gladys asked. William, he is good. Caroline smiled. He started kindergarten last month. Margaret sends me pictures almost every day. William Bennett. Derek's son, though Derek would never be part of his life. The boy was being raised by his grandmother with financial support from the trust Caroline had established using Derek's seized assets. He had his mother's smile, Victoria's smile. Caroline hoped he had his mother's strength too. And your other kid, Lucas, coming for dinner tonight. Caroline checked her watch. Should be here soon. Good. Gladys drained her whiskey. You deserve some happiness after all this garbage. She stood up to leave, then paused at the door. Hey, I never asked. What happened to the mistress? The blonde one, Vanessa. She works at a coffee shop downtown, trying to finish her degree. You could have destroyed her. Gladys's eyes were sharp. She destroyed your marriage, lied about you in court, but you helped her instead. Carolyn considered the question. She was a victim too, she said finally, a different kind of victim. Derek used her the same way he used everyone, as a tool to get what he wanted. She turned to look out the window. Besides, destroying her would not have made me feel better. It would have just made me more like him. Gladys nodded slowly. Your father would be proud of you. She said it gruffly, embarrassed by the emotion. He was a good man. You turned out to be a good woman. Thank you, Gladys. Yeah, well, do not get sappy on me. She headed for the door. Dinner tomorrow? There is a fancy Italian place that just opened. I want to try the lobster ravioli. It is a date. After Gladys left, Carolyn sat alone in the quiet office. The sun had finished setting, leaving the city lit by a million artificial lights. Ships moved slowly across the bay, carrying cargo to distant ports. Her ships now. Her company. Her life. She thought about everything she had been through. The years of obsession, the betrayal, the devastating lows when she had been certain she would never recover. And she thought about what she had learned. Being invisible is not always a weakness. Sometimes it is a gift, a chance to see what others miss, to watch and learn and wait for the right moment. The people who underestimate you are giving you an opportunity. They are lowering their guard, showing you their true selves, revealing the weaknesses they think they can hide. And patience, real patience, is not about waiting for someone else to save you. It is about becoming strong enough to save yourself. Her phone buzzed again. Lucas was in the lobby. Carolyn gathered her things and headed for the elevator. Tonight she would have dinner with her son. Tomorrow she would run a company. Next week she would visit Margaret and William in Museum and continue building a life she was proud of. The fight was over. The healing had begun. And Carolyn Mitchell, the invisible wife, was finally exactly where she belonged. Not in anyone's shadow, not waiting for permission, not apologizing for taking up space. Standing in her own light, owning her own story. Ready for whatever came next. As she stepped into the elevator, her phone buzzed one more time. A text from an unknown number. She opened it. A photograph. Her office through the window, taken from the building across the street. And a message. Derek says hello from federal prison. He has friends on the outside. This is not over. Signed, a friend. Caroline stared at the image. Her heart rate spiked. Old fear tried to claw its way back, but she did not let it take hold. She had survived worse than this. She had faced down a murderer in open court. She had rebuilt her life from ashes. She had become someone she was proud of, and she would be damned if she let them win now. She forwarded the message to the FBI contact she had on speed dial. Then she deleted it. The elevator doors opened on the lobby. Lucas was waiting, smiling, looking more like the boy she remembered and less like the angry young man he had been 6 months ago. Hey, Mom. He hugged her. Ready for dinner? Always. She hugged him back. Let us go. They walked out into the San Francisco night. The air was cool. The streets were busy with people heading home, heading out, living their lives. Somewhere out there, Derek's friends were watching, planning, waiting. Let them. Carolyn Mitchell had spent 18 years being underestimated, being dismissed, being invisible. She had used that time to become something stronger than any of them imagined. And if they came for her again, she would be ready. She looked up at the night sky, at the stars barely visible through the city lights. This is not the end, she thought. It is just the beginning. And whatever comes next, I can handle it. Because I am not the invisible wife anymore. I am Caroline Mitchell. And I am just getting started. And that is how the tables turned. Derek Mitchell thought he held all the cards. He thought money and power made him untouchable. He thought the quiet woman in the corner was nothing to worry about. He forgot the most important rule. You never truly know someone until you try to destroy them. Carolyn did not just survive. She thrived. She took every brick he threw at her and built a castle he could only dream of entering. It is a reminder to all of us. Dignity, intelligence, patience. These are the most powerful weapons you can wield. The truth always finds a way to come out eventually. Now I want to hear from you. What would you have done in Caroline's shoes? Would you have helped Vanessa at the coffee shop like Caroline did? Or would you have walked right past her? Drop your answer in the comments below. I read every single one. If this story gave you chills, hit that like button. It helps more than you know. And if you do not want to miss the next story, subscribe and tap that notification bell. Thank you for watching. I will see you in the next one.